David Irving is a man who went from being a wealthy and respected historian to a national pariah and an international outcast.
For the last 50 or 60 years, he is the author of many, many books about World War II.
In 1963, this seemingly anonymous, non-university but self-educated writer would publish his first book about the firebombings of Dresden. Now retitled Apocalypse, this book would catapult him into the literary mainstream. Other books, such as Hitler's War, Hess the Missing Years, as well as other biographies about Sir Winston Churchill, Hermann Goering, the Desert Fox Erwin Rommel, Joseph Goebbels and Albert Speer, would go on to confirm Irving as one of the world's leading intellectuals concerning the Second World War. And he has also travelled and lectured extensively about one particular subject, the Holocaust, and more infamously, Auschwitz.
I decided to go to Auschwitz myself and see everything. The concentration camp, the gas chambers, the crematoriums, to see it all for myself.
I saw the house where the camp commandant, Rudolf Hoes, lived with his family, where he was hung and executed after his war crime trial in 1947. And I saw what every other tourist went to Auschwitz to see: a gas chamber. But one that was reconstructed, that is, after the war and after the liberation of the camp. Here in this particular camp, only homosexuals, political prisoners and other undesirables were kept and made to work. It was up the road at the second camp called Auschwitz-Birkenau that the actual gassings, aka the final solution, took place. Here at this camp, I saw at least 3 to 4 gas chambers and crematoriums that the Nazis had tried to cover up at the end of the war by blowing up with explosives. It was here that families were separated from each other and that the extermination of the Jews took place. This plaque at the camp tells us that at least 1.1 million people were murdered at Auschwitz-Birkenau.
But wait a minute. I thought that Auschwitz-Birkenau was the busiest death camp out of all the concentration camps. If only 1.1 million died there, well then, where were the other 5 to 6 to 7 million murdered?
In 1945, after the chaos of the Second World War had finally ended and the world was at peace, the official death toll for the Jews in Europe was considered to be 40 million. But then it was reduced to 25 million, then 21 million, and then 7 to 8 million. It was known at the time, thanks to the Red Cross, that the official numbers of the population of the Jews in Europe stood to be, at the very most, 6 million. But this didn't necessarily include the Jews in the East, in the Soviet Union. This would be just one of many subjects that David Irving would place under the microscope. In 1983, Irving dramatically uncovered one of the greatest hoaxes of the late 20th century. At a press conference organized by Stern magazine in Germany, he spectacularly proved that the so-called Hitler diaries were fakes, concocted by a renowned German confidence trickster. As a result of this, the Times newspaper in London, Stern magazine, as well as certain scholars at the University of Oxford and Cambridge in Great Britain, were humiliated on learning that the ink and paper of the diaries did not exist until after 1945. But it wasn't until the late 80s, during a certain trial in Canada, that the infamous term Holocaust denier would be used to describe the controversial historian. When that's thrown in your face, Holocaust denier, I suppose you couldn't care less now, but...
Well, after the word Holocaust was invented, since then there's been a whole industry spin-off. The first thing that spun off it was the word Holocaust denier. It's a very useful phrase. Stick the word Holocaust denier on somebody and it's like calling somebody a paedophile. Sex offenders. I'm a history offender. Unemployable, unpublishable. Don't let him in the archives. Banned from a number of archives around the world now because I'm a Holocaust denier. Banned from the United States. Well, not banned, but colossal problems imposed on me entering the United States for the last 3 years, but now they've been lifted, now they're Obama's. And then the other word is a Holocaust survivor. Holocaust survivor, that's the next derivative word from the Holocaust. To be a Holocaust survivor, you then bask in the glow of the Holocaust. Daughter of a Holocaust survivor. Hello, what does this actually mean? It means she's the daughter of somebody to whom not very much happened compared with those who suffered under the Holocaust, those who were killed or gassed or poisoned or shot in pits. So it's become slightly absurd now. Anybody who stands up for free speech can be accused of being an anti-Semite. Gradually these views will be subsumed into the general knowledge and will be proven to be fake or true. Why should the Holocaust be any different? What kind of history is it that needs to have prison sentences and fines and general ostracism imposed in order to preserve the legend? At any one time in Germany now, there's 7 or 8 people in prison because of this. When Professor Longerich gave evidence in the Lippstadt trial and he started talking about the consensus of historical opinion, proving that I was wrong, of German historians. And I said, Professor Longerich, I cross-examined him. I said, Professor Longerich, you talk about the consensus of German historians who believe that I'm wrong on this. Would you tell us something about this consensus? How is it arrived at? I don't understand what you're saying, he said. I said, well, can you tell the court, for example, what happens to those who don't believe in this consensus? He said, I still don't know what you're saying. He knew very well where I was going with this. I said, well, will you tell the court what happens to those who challenge any aspect of this consensus in Germany? He said, I can't give any. I said, well, would it surprise you to hear that a gentleman who'd served as the chairman of a lecture that I gave in southern Germany was sentenced to 7 years in prison for this? And he served 7 years in prison for having chaired a meeting that I spoke at. What kind of consensus is it when people who express opposing opinions are subjected to draconian fines, in my case $30,000? I told the audience the gas chamber they showed the tourists at Auschwitz is a fake built after the war. For that one sentence I was fined 30,000 Deutschmarks. 5 years later the Polish government admitted the building was built in 1948. So I was right, but some restrictions apply, you don't get refunds. And it is still a criminal offence to say the sentence in Germany.
In 1996, the author Deborah Lipstadt wrote the book Denying the Holocaust, where she accused David Irving of being a Holocaust denier.
As a result of this, David Irving sued her for libel. The court case lasted many weeks, and Irving lost. It was found in court and decreed that Irving was a Holocaust denier, an anti-Semite, and a racist who, for ideological reasons, was grossly misrepresenting historical evidence.
When I was in prison in Austria 3 years ago, I was writing on Himmler, and I got the Institute of History in Munich to send me my notes on my interview with Himmler's brother, which I had conducted in 1971. And I realized as I read it in my prison cell that the word Holocaust didn't appear. We're talking about the subject, of course. Himmler's brother said, Mr. Irving, I think you're wrong. I don't think Heine did this on his own. Heine was too much of a coward. He would have certainly not done anything like this without top cover from Hitler. But then I realized the word Holocaust didn't appear. The reason was that in 1971 the word Holocaust didn't exist in this connection. And then I remember about 1972 standing in the foyer of the Institute of History in Munich, and their leading historian in Germany, Professor Helmut Krausnick, coming up to me and saying, "You're an English chap, you can help us on this. There's this word Holocaust. We don't know what it means. Can you help us what the meaning of the word is?" Here's the kind of little thing that sticks in your memory years. Here we are 37 years later. And then since then, of course, the word has ballooned exponentially. If you can go to the Times Index or the New York Times Index, you'll see the word doesn't exist before 1970, but it does after. So this means that about 1970-71, there was a meeting in some public relations office in Madison Avenue where the community leaders had come along, the Jewish community leaders, and had said, "We're not making any headway with our tragedy here. We suffered this huge tragedy. It doesn't seem to sink into the public consciousness. There's been no talk about it. It's not in Churchill's memoirs, it's not in Eisenhower's memoirs, it's not in de Gaulle's memoirs." And the public relations people have said, well, that's because you're marketing it wrong. You've got to market it like any other product. You've got to give it a capital H. You've got to give it a name, the Holocaust. You've got to give it a capital H like Tylenol, a capital letter. You've got to brand mark, trademark it. You've got to make it exclusive. There was no other Holocaust. Thou shalt have no other Holocaust than ours. This is unique. Stick to one slogan and don't vary that slogan. The 6 million. Don't say the 5.5 million or the 4.9 million. It's always the 6 million. Once you learn the basic rules of marketing on a product, believe me, you can make big money out of this. The money doesn't go to the people who deserve it, the survivors who suffered. They're not getting the money, it's gone to the big business. And when somebody like me as a historian independently comes along and says, okay, now let's open this package that you're marketing, you end up with this huge industry with all their millions at their disposal being used to crush you.